Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you for your service and for your candor today. Now, as I listened to Senator Fisher talk about and ask about nuclear modernization, I wanted to follow up on that, and then I heard Senator Blackburn talk about Space Force, and I wanted to follow up on that. So I'm going to try to combine the two as quickly as I can because I think there are some similarities, and I'll start with you, Secretary Shanahan. You know, many of the critics of nuclear modernization imply or state emphatically that we can't afford that it's unaffordable, that in fact, we had to choose, in essence, between nuclear or conventional modernization. And yet, as I look at the budget historically, and as I look at the budget going forward, I see, for the most part, a peaking of modernization costs for the nuclear force at under 6.5% in year 2029. Can we afford not to do it? I mean, it seems to me that that's a pretty efficient use of deterrence dollars, and I'd just like to hear you elaborate a little bit on whether we can afford it.
I'll ask David to talk about the affordability, but as our competitors are building up their nuclear capabilities, this is setting aside budget, as our competitors are building up their nuclear capability or modernizing, we should not unilaterally disarm. I think we have to start there. In terms of timing of the budget, David, maybe you could speak to that.
So, Senator, the numbers you used are correct. The peak is about 6.5%. When you realize that in normal maintenance runs 3%, right? That increase for the amount of peace and stability that deterrent provides us against what is probably the most catastrophic threat we can face, I think is a reasonable and sound approach, and something that you'd want to be very careful about changing because of the stability that it provides globally and for the safety of the American people.
Okay, so then let's move to space, because I think I have a similar line of questioning as it relates to the affordability of it. I understand concerns. It's easy to see why somebody that has a particular system within the Air Force might feel threatened by a competing for limited dollars. And Secretary Shanahan, I think you've referenced it, at least to some degree, and I'd like to have you elaborate even a little more on the efficiencies that can be found. Clearly, space is a realm that we're competing in. Clearly, we need to probably ramp up some of our capabilities there, as you pointed out earlier. You know, we can't pick our parents. The resiliency isn't what it needs to be, and yet. Maybe you could speak to, and maybe this would be a good one for the comptroller as well, to the efficiencies that will be found in the process of creating a Space Force as a sixth branch.
I think on the efficiency side, and I've had conversations with Senator Reid on this subject, and many in Congress are experts in this area. We can't build a bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. In standing up the Space Force, we have a chance to build it from the bottom up. I think we'll build a bureaucracy if we build it from the top down. So it's an opportunity to build it correctly. The biggest effort needs to be at retiring the risk. We're too vulnerable. And, you know, it's a little bit like the nuclear conversation. I actually think it's going to cost us less. I mean, I've had lots of arguments about whether that's true or not. I think at the end of the day, I mean, what we hear quite a bit is this is change versus the status quo. This is a fundamental structural change. But in that structural change, we'll get after reducing our vulnerability, and I really believe at the end of the day have more capability and more money in terms of we won't spend as much.
Well, and maybe speak a little bit to the realigning of existing space programs as part of that efficiency, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When we talk about standing up a new service, this is a very small service. You think about 15 to 18,000 people, so it's really not about a large group being consolidated. This is really talking about how do you consolidate development efforts within the department. So how do we take what's being done? You know, the Army is going to undertake a brand new modernization program. Mm-hmm. How do we combine that with work going on in the Air Force, with what's going on in the Navy, and then integrate it into all the combatant commands? This is really about doing it at a DOD level, and these are like once-in-a-generation opportunities. Since we must address the contested environment, and we're going to make significant changes, why not do it at an integrated level for the department instead of, in each service? Mm-hmm.
Well, your answers were as efficient as I expect the Space Force to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you.